Today, everybody, we have got Dan Lovatt, author. How's it going? How's it going, man?
It's going really well, thank you, Luke. Thank you for having me as well. It's an amazing opportunity. Things are going fairly well. Very tumultuous time in the world, still is. But things are going well, mate.
Good, good. How have you found this weird period of time that we've found ourselves in?
Yeah, well, for somebody like me, in terms of what I do and writing and things, it's an absolute dream on paper. I mean, I don't mean to sound insensitive when I say it's a dream, but in terms of, being inside your house, it's like you're forced, right? Okay, if I can't write anything now, when the hell am I going to write anything? Like that's it. Like you're thinking, right, okay, I've got this down. So, since March, 3 or 4 months. I was going, right, okay, I'll write every day. I'll do a little bit, I'm not going anywhere, Sainsbury's is only a couple of hours a day trip. So I was going and then I was writing and then I just completely lost the ability to even write a bit. I mean, besides uni and I still had assignments for my masters and things, so I was doing those. But in terms of like my own projects, I was really, really
Yeah.
struggling. Kind of harness some motivation to do it. And judging by what I've seen on social media and everything like that, I think people are in a similar boat. It's kind of like it's so easy when you think about it on paper that then I don't know, it's something just completely counterintuitive happens. It's quite strange.
You're the first writer that we've had on. I'm a writer as well, so it's. I think the feelings of things are going to be very sort of mutual. I thought the same thing. I was like, what, lockdown? Like, wait, I've got to stay in? Get in. I was buzzing. I was so, like, again, not to sound insensitive, but, like, I think other writers are listening to this, they will often, we sort of often find a way of maybe avoiding writing for some periods of time, and a lot of things are more important than when we're writing. And
That's right.
Being stuck at home, you don't have any other jobs, people can't constantly ask you for favors, everywhere was closed, what else was there to do?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And at the start, I think it was similar to you, I was like, get in, awesome.
Get in, yeah, ka-ching.
Yeah.
The dream situation.
Yeah. And now I'm like, what? No. I'm sick of the alphabet. Like,
literally, and like even the lack of, like you're saying, like this lack of stimulus from elsewhere. Maybe that contributed to it. The fact that we weren't going around in our daily lives and taking all of our experiences in that we then use. Or, I don't really know. I think. Like you said, you kind of touched on what I think it might be, which is where I've actually come down to do it. And I've gone, oh, do you know what? I might just do it tomorrow. Yeah. And then that, continually happens for 3 months because, it's a daunting thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's a daunting thing.
It's not as simple as just typing and editing. It's mentally tiring. Especially, you put together a novel. That's not something that is just, we're not all Stephen King, like, done.
No.
It's 3 books a month.
Neither am I, by the way, for the record.
Yeah, we're not all Stephen King, and we can't all just chuck 3 books a month out. It's very, there's a lot of mental stimulation that's going on, and it does get very tiring. So I mean, sort of,
yes.
Tell us a little bit about your book. How did you come to do that? And
so in my first year of my BA degree, I basically around December time I was writing short stories initially. And then I kind of decided to just try a slightly longer piece, not a full length novel, because I kind of had obviously I've read novels, but thank God I'm in an English degree. But I didn't really, from a writing point of view, have a kind of idea about how long that would be. So I just said, you know what, just write for as long as you can and stop. So I started to write like around about 500 to 1,000 words every single day, like killing time at uni. And then over the course of like 4 months, I'd got like a 100,000 word draft
Yeah.
of a very messy, because first drafts always are, but a very messy novel basically. So then after that, it took a lot of editing, and I had like lecturers in my creative writing side saying like writing is rewriting. So although I'd done that in 4 months, the process hadn't actually ended there, which I was very, very peed off about, because I was like, right, I've done it now. Cheers, guys. There you go. Just pass it on to a team of editors. There you go.
Sign those copies. Off you go.
Yeah, just like there you go. Bang, bang, bang. Doesn't matter about the caps lock on page 30 or anything, like off you go. But the editing process for it took until about midway through my final year. And then I self-published it. So I was sending it out to literary agents and things like that, I should say. Before I was sending it out after I felt like it was a sufficient kind of edit, which differs for everybody. People could edit it 100 times, people could edit it twice.
Yeah.
It's completely differs.
Yeah.
So I was sending it out to literary agents, and I wasn't really hearing anything back. And they say, like, get ready for 100, 200, 300, 400 rejections.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, that's fine. And then, I got 2, and then like I had a little tear, and I was like,
yeah. It's hard. It's really,
it is. So I had those rejections, and I kind of said, you know what, for this project, for my very first thing, I've written it at this age. I'm obviously, going on to do other things. I will take the necessary and sensible option and self-publish it. It wasn't necessarily a money-making thing for me primarily. So I knew what my own limitations were with marketing and things like that. I knew that's a job that somebody else would do a lot better if I was to, go through traditional publishing. So I said, you know what, I'll market it as limited as possible. All my friends and my family, and share as far as you can, not expecting a major amount back. And then that's eventually what happened. So through Kindle Direct Publishing, I think it went up, about midway through third year. And it did, as well as I thought it would do, and there was no disappointment in that. But the main thing for me, like I said, wasn't the kind of book sales. It wasn't anything else. It was just having one piece done, so then I could go right. Okay, on to the next thing.
Yeah, that's I totally agree with what you're saying. I mean, so my final year of university, put together this series of poems and stuff, and at the start you're sort of like loving it, and it's like great, and you're just sitting there like, this is fucking great, love it. And then after you send it to so many people and they go, change that, didn't like that, you're just like, do you know what, man?
Yeah.
It's just like, right, sod it, I'm done with it. And you get it to a point where, look, I'm happy with it, this is how I thought it was going to turn out. And a lot of the time, I mean, it's a bit of a tangent, but I think a lot of the time with editing is people forget how the creator wants it, and they try to sort of almost change it a bit into, I want it to be like this so I can enjoy it. And I definitely experienced that a lot with my poetry. And in second year, I did playwriting module, and I had this whole idea in my head and put it all together, sent it to the lecturer. She sent it back with corrections. I corrected it, and I think it was still the lowest mark I got at university. It's so, like, editing and stuff, it's hard, it's tough.
And I think there's a higher question and a higher kind of discussion there, which is creative writing in general. If you go to study that, and I know you did as well, how do you provide markers and kind of barriers, or whatever you want to call it, targets, whatever, of what good writing actually constitutes? Because it is so, people, regardless of, I know there are certain skills and there are techniques and everything that will definitely improve your writing every single time. But there is a massive element of subjectivity in there where even from lecturer to lecturer, like you were saying, or person to person in workshops or whatever, that could go from the best thing they've, heard in that group to the worst thing from person to person.
Yeah.
And especially if it's not the kind of thing that you would necessarily read in terms of content, that can have a massive impact on your, on how your work's kind of perceived.
Yeah. With one of my best friends, he sort of said something similar, and we started talking about how can you, as a lecturer, accurately and sensibly mark a creative piece. And it's like that with all forms of art. My girlfriend's a scientist. If we go to an art gallery, and especially if they've got like some sort of like an avant-garde or a postmodern exhibit on, she's like, I don't get this. Like, what the hell? Like, if she's looking at a Jackson Pollock, and it looks like someone's just like, it's just charted Play-Doh all over the place. She's like, don't get it. Don't get it. Or and it's sort of it's the same for lecturers. And there have been times where people have asked me, like in seminars and stuff, to scrutinize the work, and I've said, like, I'm not going to, because what you've created is not something like I can tell you now, I will really hate what you've put together, and I won't be able to provide constructive feedback because I don't read your genre. Whereas if you go to somebody who is interested in, for example, if somebody has put together a crime piece, if you then go up to somebody who reads a lot of crime and thriller, that's your better resource rather than the person that would only read fantasy or something.
Fantasy, it's exactly right. And we had, we had loads of people who love fantasy in our workshop, and that's unfortunately not my thing. And I wished it was, because in a group of 6 people, it would make the most amount of sense for everybody to give constructive feedback. But all I could literally give was maybe change that word. That means, in the grand scheme of things, like, naffle, like absolutely naffle. But I actually can't, because I don't read enough fantasy to give a broader context to what you're trying to do. Do you know what I mean? It's very difficult.
I mean, it is. It's so hard, and to do it as a lecturer. I mean, so my poetry focuses almost exclusively on mental health. You might then have, there's people that think like mental health and all that's just a load of crap, and submitting work to somebody like that, they might just go, don't get it, not bothered, whatever.
Don't get it.
But then
no.
I think it also sort of works the same way, like, say, if you were creating a fantasy piece and then you submitted it to Tolkien's biggest fan, they can then almost try and turn your work into that. Yeah, so
because that's their marker, that's their standard of. That's exactly right. And as well, I think maybe not necessarily with fellow readers who don't have, a kind of maybe a career or anything in writing, but actually good writing sometimes, or like the markers that we set, to compare, is actually all to do with how well it can be marketed and how well that profit can be made from that thing. And that's, kind of a parallel off good writing. Good writing can often be, how well can this be marketed? You go through, you have certain trends, don't you? So like crime, serial killers, it's the golden age of serial killer documentaries, ITV series, Netflix, whatever. So crime novels are going to get hugely more interest. So then they'll go, okay, this could be marketed really well, even if it's not to necessarily the scratch that, other novels are that aren't going through that similar trend, if you see what I mean. And there's also a bigger kind of a wheel of kind of capitalist kind of profit-driven things, even in literature.
Oh, massively. I mean, I'm subscribed to two writing magazines, and they often feature like a Q&A type of thing that is all about like what's going to be the next big genre, like what's the next big thing, and it's people saying, I want to make a living off this, and I therefore need to know the genre and I need to write for that genre. And it's like, that's not.
No, that's not the way it should be.
No, and just because there's going to be a next big genre doesn't mean that it's going to completely decimate everything
it eclipses
else.
everything else. Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah,
And what's the point in I'd like to think, as kind of as cringy as it is, that you're kind of writing not your own story, but a story that means a lot to you,
yeah,
regardless of what that may be and whatever form it may take. So just writing to appease a potential trend is just kind of self-defeating, because it is such a writing is such a cathartic process. It's such a kind of emotionally investing process. So writing just to predict, I think, and I'll tell you about not to do with any like books or anything, but I went to a seminar. This was like screenplays for TV and film, and we were kind of just brainstorming, ideas. I think everyone had to write like a little synopsis, and then we shared them around and go, what was the problem with this? Whatever advantages? And the woman, the representative for LA Productions, was like, no, we don't want lesbians. Lesbians have been done. Lesbians have had their time.
What?
Somebody had written a synopsis about a cult. He's like, no, we've had cults. Cult trend went, year and a half ago with The Sinner and everything like that. So she's like, no, we don't want lesbians. We don't want cults. Right? Killing Eve. We don't want lesbians. What's next? And I was like, what if you've got the most incredible, even personal account, as kind of far away as that might seem, a personal account of your time or someone in your family's time about being in a cult? What if you've just got an amazing story about someone being in a cult? What if, you want to tell your story about, coming out and being a lesbian or whatever? You know what I mean? Why should we be trying to appease this kind of marketing kind of strategy? It's
that's crazy.
I know it is, and like I think just hearing it so bluntly, because I'd kind of had suspicions that that's what it was. But just to hear it so bluntly, like, no, we've had done lesbians, Killing Eve's been on, done that, right? Okay, what's next? It's crazy.
My God, I mean, is this? I wonder if there is some sort of checklist in the world of publishing, and it renews like every 10 years or so. Like, we've done lesbians, we've done cookbooks are on the way out, cults done, like. What?
No, I know exactly. So it's like, right, okay, we're going to go on people with disabilities this year. Send us your stories. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous.
It is. It's crazy, and especially with that sort of monetizing, like exploiting people, and then monetizing from it, and then going, we don't care anymore.
Yeah, we don't care.
It's like,
exactly like your stories are only valid for a certain amount of time, and then after that, we don't care.
Yeah, like.
It's
no.
No, I know it's so strange, and I think it's something that really needs to be kind of challenged at a higher kind of level, and kind of taken away, or at least partly kind of separated from the wider picture of marketing and things like that. I know that obviously it has to be marketed to a degree in order for it to have an audience, but I don't think that the actual content of the piece should then be, put on a certain time scale, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
People come to it at different things, don't they? People come to their stories at different times in their lives, and I don't think, if you wanted to write a story 2 years ago that was something valid, but actually you've decided to write it now and now it's invalid, I don't think that's correct. I don't think that encourages people to necessarily write a story that they want to write, and then that takes away all the fun from it anyway.
Yeah, that's definitely. It's weird, because I mean, being a writer is definitely a valid career choice. So it is work. But it's one of those jobs where you don't necessarily have to see it as work, because writing can be a fun, it often is a fun process. And if you're then thinking, right, well, I can't write about this, and this, that's what my speciality is, I'm stuck now. Like, that's, and I know I totally appreciate and agree with what you were saying about marketing, and the whole marketing industry is a very weird sort of place, I imagine. So there obviously will be a rise and fall in certain genres, but that doesn't, just because there's a fall, that doesn't necessarily mean that it has gone. I mean,
no, totally.
My favorite writer is Poe, Edgar Allan Poe. And I mean, what, it was like 200 years ago? And it's still there. Lovecraft, you know, the whole Eldritch horror genre. He was, what, 100 years ago? And that is sort of still going on.
Still going.
Not to the peak that it was maybe post during the Cold War, when everybody was sort of freaking out and science fiction was at its height.
At its height, yeah.
But it's definitely still there. To say that, you know, just there aren't as many people that like this anymore.
And kind of taking away its whole ability to be an influence on things. I think it kind of takes away a kind of not a tradition. I don't know if that's necessarily the right word, but it takes away the kind of the wider influence. So treating Poe is an influence from 200 years ago, regardless of his actual, you know, incredible work. He's influenced so many writers now, and I don't think they should be treated as separate things, blocked by trends, if you know what I mean. Like, you know, Gothic horror writers have suddenly just come back after all this time, and they've had no influence from. I think it should be the kind of the history of it should be appreciated in the kind of timelines and things like that. So yeah, I completely agree with you. It's a very I don't think it should be ran with a kind of business ethos and a pragmatic ethos, and I think that could be potentially dangerous for literature and for television and film and all creative spheres.
Yeah, I do think that definitely is a problem with art. Is people, you know, some of the most valuable things in the world are pieces of art, which then that almost sort of like, I don't know how to really word it, but if you see a piece of art that is worth $500 million or whatever, that can then influence people to think like, that means that I am going to have to produce something that is of worth. Not necessarily even of similar worth.
Yes.
It commodifies it rather than it staying as a sort of an outlet and a form of expression. It almost becomes a sort of business.
That's right.
And I mean, I've got so many like journals upstairs where I've put my own pieces of art into it, but none of it would ever sell for any money. And if that hadn't been if I hadn't done that, then I wouldn't have had the chance to sort of experiment with anything.
Exactly. Did you draw, you know, with that art, did you go into that process thinking, I'm going to make money from this?
No, God, no.
No, exactly, precisely. So it doesn't even deter you from doing it.
I remember it was in the library at Salford. There was a table with like a load of newspapers on, and one of them had a picture of Boris Johnson on it. And then there was another paper that had the word like arse on it or something like that. So I was like, oh, right.
A perfect match.
Yeah, I was like, right. I'm gonna do something with this.
Destiny.
So I cut it all out, and I was cutting and sticking and whatever, and it was just the most like childish thing I'd done in ages. And now there's just a page in like one of my art books of Boris Johnson, and on the top it's like it just says something like "I'm an arse," but it's in like it's in like
poetic in itself.
Yeah, it's like this newspaper font, so it's like. It looks dead fancy, and it's, I'm an arse, and Boris is there like smiling and waving, and it's like I did not think for a minute. I didn't think I'm going to create something amazing. I'm going to create something hilarious. No. I'm going to create something that's going to make me rich. I just sort of went. I just want to do it. Like.
Yeah. That's literally it. Even if it's for a joke that I laugh about for 24 hours, or it's for precisely.
Definitely, exactly. Just for a bit of background information, how did you sort of get into writing and that sort of thing?
So, I would say I started writing lyrics and things first. I've always been very kind of musically orientated. I can't play any instruments, but I've always started to. I'm terrible.
I'm exactly the same.
Dexterity, hand-eye coordination. Like, no, can't even play easy on guitar. You know what I mean? It is literally that level. But I started writing song lyrics when I was like 17, and then as I kind of found out that I was going to university through, like, obviously getting my A-level results back, I started to try and write, like I was saying before, short stories, never really went anywhere. And then eventually I came to uni, and that was my first big kind of writerly wider influence, the kind of thing that made me think, okay, this is something that I could actually do. My parents have always been incredibly supportive, but they don't have like literature backgrounds, if you know what I mean. They don't. They weren't sitting there, reading to me every single day, or, we weren't writing poems together.
Come on, Dan,
like
it's time for some Bukowski.
But they, come on, some light reading before bed. No, exactly. So like they weren't doing that. So of course they were incredibly supportive and whatever. But when I was at university, that was when my kind of I had a kind of wider inkling that I could potentially do this thing, and even if it was just for the purpose of me just doing stuff for myself, typing them, not showing anybody, showing myself. And then the workshops and the workshops more so than the lectures from the creative writing point of view, because you're showing your work to people. You have to, don't you?
Yeah.
So then that kind of goes, right, okay, I've got a bit of positive feedback, or I've got to produce something at least that I can show to people. So then I can really get into it there. So I'd say that I got my kind of writerly kind of backbone in that first kind of 6 months at university. Like I said, I did write before with short stories, but they were just, I consider them to be more of a pastime than me realizing my identity kind of thing. And then from that point, I've kind of gone on and I've tried to do little bits in everything, screenplays. I've got a play finished. I'm on at Fringe, Manchester Fringe next year. Flash fiction pieces, obviously my book. So they've kind of just, as I've been writing those, it's gradually kind of built my identity to kind of at least have some kind of like repertoire behind me. But I came to the game very, very late. Like people that I know, a lot of people always say, I was, writing as a child. I was doing bits like that, and I was never very interested. We kind of fall into that sort of, well, I do fall into that millennial kind of thing of like, I just want to play Xbox, mate. I'm not bothered about writing. Bloody hell, like, I'll do it from the homework, but films, Xbox, that was me. People are like, I've started writing from the age of 10, or I started writing from the age of 7, or I just no, that just didn't happen for me. And I think it'd be untrue to myself to kind of give myself that level of prestige, really. That's just not the reality. So I came to it quite late in the game.
I was very, very similar. I would read a lot when I was younger, but again, I was sort of the same. Like, all my friends are on Xbox. I want to go. Like, I want to
play Call of Duty on the headset.
I mean, the only creative discussions we would ever have would be like a Modern Warfare 2 lobby where you're just getting rinsed, absolutely rinsed within an inch of your life. Like,
it's tiring. It's mentally jarring. I don't have time for writing, mate. I'm invested in this.
Exactly. So playwriting, you've got your play. Is it Toxic? It's called.
It is. Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So, in terms of writing it, I did a playwriting module with Mike Heath. I don't know if you would have had him at the time when you were there.
No.
Did you have somebody called was it? No, not Jane. What was Did you have an older lady?
Yeah, short grey hair.
Oh, glasses.
Yeah.
She was called, I can't think of her name.
I can't either.
But anyway, I know who you mean. Yeah. So I think she must have kind of gone away or whatever. Anyway, backtracking. So that started in that lecture, and basically what happened was, as an exercise, we all had the same like opening kind of scene description, and we had to go off and kind of write an entire scene for it. So I did that, and then from there I was like, oh, actually, I've never tried this before. It's very different to writing novels, in the sense that it's like, with all screenplays, it's very kind of dialogue. It drives the action. There's got to be a certain tempo to it, which is kind of more fluid with novels. And in terms of your exposition and stuff, that's just not really there. So I was like, okay, this is interesting. I'm going to carry on with this because I kind of like the change up of pace. So I basically carried on with that over about the course of, God, I'd say 8 to 9 months, something like that. I'd kind of had a finished piece. So I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, you know, I'd submitted it kind of, I think 3 or 4 months in, like an extract of it for an assignment, got a really good mark. So I thought, okay, this could actually go somewhere, you know, edit it a couple of times, send it to a few people, what do you think of this? You know, great, flash forward, whatever. So I'd had a couple of friends who had done Fringe before, and my director, I'm kind of jumping a bit forward here, but my director, Meg, she'd been doing Fringe, she's done Fringe, you know, quite a bit, and then had other people who had done it too. So they were like, why don't you go for that? Like that's quite a cool thing, you know, they champion new kind of writers and things. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll give it a go. Applied for Fringe because you apply for the venues and they accept you, kind of, they accept you or reject you. It's not a case of like someone approaching you based on your script. You know what I mean? You don't send off your script to anybody necessarily. So I applied for that, and then, like, lo and behold, the King's Arms got back to me and said, "This sounds like a great kind of idea." I applied for 3 nights. They said, "Yeah, we can give you 3 nights in the vaults, which is like the basement bit of the King's Arms." So I was like, "That sounds great." So that was secured in for the play. It was in association with. I realise I'm kind of jumping in bits here. I apologise for that. I'm kind of like doing a Christopher Nolan where I'm jumping like two and. I should tell you about the story really, but I'll go to that. So, the play was in association with Calm, the men's mental health charity.
Wow,
so the play itself is about men's mental health. It's about depression because, you know, it's a killer of men.
Yeah, isn't it like the number one killer for men under 30?
Men, I mean, it's really bad that I can't actually remember the very specific. I should know that off the top of my head, but it's the biggest killer of men under 45.
Right. Wow.
I'm gonna go with that. I think that age might be slightly younger than that. But it's, you know, absolutely phenomenally, you know, just abhorrent, and obviously the way that we've been conditioned as in our gender kind of performance of men is to not necessarily talk about those things. And I think as a society in our generation, we are getting better. It's a lot more acceptable for us to speak out about things, but, you know, that's not even half the battle done yet. So I thought it was important to, even as a kind of to embody what that conversation would mean, and how even the piece in itself, regardless of what else it says, is just an hour and a half where that discussion kind of happens. I wanted to kind of basically do that and hopefully do it justice. I mean, I am lucky in the sense that I've never suffered from incredibly bad or detrimental to my physical health, mental health, you know. But I know I've got very good friends who have, and I thought that was an important thing to write about effectively.
Yeah, definitely, and I mean that's not very common to have somebody that, like you say, hasn't experienced it to such a high level.
Yeah,
like other people have, to be able to sort of empathize with that. You know, there's still that whole just smile or just go for a run mentality about about mental health, and that is massively important, definitely.
Yeah, I think it's kind of short-term solutions to a long-term problem, which is an issue as well. I think all those things, like, I know physical well-being is incredibly good for mental health in the long run. I know a lot of people find that extremely cathartic and extremely helpful, but I think there is also there's a greater problem going on there too, which you know, partnered with that, which I think only well, not only being expressive and talking about it, but I think that can help a lot of people just to have somebody kind of there, ready whenever they are to do that. I think that's my kind of viewpoint on it. And I know that's not useful for every single person, but with my friends who have had it, I think it's useful to have that person there. So that's more in kind of honor of that relationship rather than everybody's.
Which is, I mean, is very admirable, because a lot of people seem to think that with mental health, like, oh, well, this worked for my uncle, so it should work for you. And it's like,
yeah, no,
completely
precisely.
different people, different circumstances, socioeconomic backgrounds.
Exactly.
There are so many factors with mental health that sort of chipping away at it, rather than trying to discover an antibiotic that will just completely solve it all. Yeah.
Eradicate it. Yeah,
Definitely.
precisely.
With, you published, you are featured, you're going to be featuring in. How have you found sort of the creative community in terms of connections? Like, are you like the tortured artist that is sort of like, I don't want to share anything with anyone ever, or are you sort of like, here, look, like what?
So the creative writing workshops, what I will say, like touching on what you've just said, they are incredibly useful in the sense that they teach you not to treat your work like your baby. And they are like, right, okay, we're gonna basically force you from the minute you walk through the door, even, it doesn't matter how crap it is, like, we're gonna force you to share it, basically. So through 3 years of that kind of conditioning, well, 4 years now actually, through that conditioning, I'm very happy to share. But I think from a writer's point of view, especially when you haven't got people who have necessarily like released something like their own thing and they're still working on their first project, or aren't ready to share, everyone's concentrating on their own thing. So the connection point of view in terms of writerly struggles has been phenomenal, because everyone can share that. But connections in terms of how are we going to make the step up from this stage to the next stage and branch out, past enclosed university into a creative society, that hasn't quite been there, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it is. It's the whole reason for this podcast, as you know. It's about setting up those opportunities for people. Some people find it so difficult to be able to connect with people. I'm one of them. I mean, I'm happy to share my work with people, but living in the Northeast, there's nothing in terms of like appreciation for art and literature. It's still very archaic in its attitudes. Like, if you go out and tell somebody, I want to be a poet, it's like, yeah, all right. Like, it's crazy.
I'm originally from Stoke, so I share that kind of that kind of traditional approach to kind of creative art. So that's why obviously moving to Salford or moving to Manchester and kind of hold the big pool of creative things should have, and it has helped me. I am not remotely ungrateful for that, but I think maybe the fault was on my behalf, but knowing what it was like in Stoke, and the same for you, and how difficult it would actually be to establish those connections and be very public in your kind of trajectory, I should have taken more advantage of my time, like, living and being based every single day in Salford, outside of university. But also as well, like, lecturers, not just lecturers, but the industry in general emphasizes how important networking is. You've got to go to all these networking nights, you've got to find these people, but then there's no kind of actual practical application of that.
Exactly. I started all this because I asked people, I was like, right, do you know what to do with your degree? Do you know where to look? Do you know how to network? Have you got friends in this industry that you want to go into? Blah, all that sort of stuff. And everybody was saying, like, I don't know where to look for jobs. I don't know what to say to people. No. And quite often, sharing your work isn't as easy as just going, look at this paper for me. You've got to have like a sort of like a relationship, even a small relationship. It's not as easy as just going up to people, giving it to them. You know, you've got to sort of know them a bit. And like I said before, there is work that I won't scrutinize because I'm not good doing a particular genre. You know, I'll check over grammar and spelling and all that stuff, but not in terms of themes and genres. It can be quite difficult.
Yes. It's who you know, isn't it? It boils down to that simple thing.
Yeah,
and
and
it's who you know as much as what you know.
It's so annoying that that's what it is. But at the same time, when you do get to know people, I've found, especially in the creative industry, there's a massive difference between knowing people in, say, a science job and knowing somebody with an artistic talent. So,
Yes.
so before, my best friend is a photographer. I've wanted to take up photography, and he's been able to help me develop my skills and stuff like that. And you know, being able to effectively use those connections is so valuable and important. But like
that's right.
When I was doing my degree, as for networking and stuff like that, it wasn't there. It didn't exist.
No.
And I mean, I was fortunate enough to have, like, I sort of had a few different friend groups at university. So, you know, I was able to meet a lot of people. That's not always the case for everybody. Right, And even then, like, coming back up to the Northeast, it's like I've taken 3 steps back. I'm back at, like, right, what do I do up here?
Yeah, precisely, yeah. Yeah, no, and I was fortunate too as well, in the sense that I had a lot of mates who all had different disciplines, and like artists, musicians, you know, graphic designers, whatever. But not everybody has that level of opportunity. And even when you do have that level of opportunity, sometimes everybody is still kind of focusing on refining their individual craft to sort of lend a hand. Sometimes it's not always as easy as that, regardless of what their particular discipline is. But like you said, coming back to your hometown, it's like you've almost taken kind of two steps back, really.
In terms of like networking and making connections, how do you go about that? Are you one of these people that, you know, like I did when I just posted on Facebook looking for people's help, or are you sort of like, how do you usually go about it?
So I would, like you, usually try and surf social media like as platforms. Twitter I found very, very helpful for both connections and writing opportunities. I've never had Twitter before, and I've only just got it in the past like 6 months. That's really good because there's like hashtags and things you can use, like writing community or whatever, and then, you know, you can build all these connections. Facebook, the same thing. Other than that, since university, I have really struggled with that face-to-face element, which I think is massively, massively important. I think you can't underestimate your ability to make a good impression on somebody in person or face-to-face like this, obviously, with Zoom and stuff. And I know with COVID, face-to-face is going to be even more challenging than it was. But I think that's so important, and that's something where my skill set's majorly lacking. The ability to, you know, speak to somebody, make a good impression, even make a pitch, you know, like a pitch of this is what I do, this is my thing. Could you potentially help me? Can I potentially help you? Because it's all, you know, well and good, you know, being friends, adding them as a friend and stuff on Facebook and doing all that. But I think it kind of does take away from your ability to take that relationship further, if you know what I mean, and know how comfortable you are with each other. Things are hard to articulate over message, that you don't think about everything, you know. Like, we're talking now, but if I had to type the conversation that we've had, I probably wouldn't have said half the things that I've said. Because naturally you talk more and you build more of a relationship and you do whatever. So I think...
Yeah, and you can go off on tangents when you're talking as well, and usually they are tangents that are helpful. But then if you were typing that, you might think,
why am I saying that? That's ridiculous.
Like that's not related at all. I sound like a dickhead. Like, in terms of artists during COVID, it's so weird. So I was speaking to my friend the other day, she's an actor and director and screenwriter, and so the figures for Netflix were expecting last year, they were expected for this year to gain an extra 7 million subscribers. They've had over double that. I think it's something like 15.7 million people
God.
have downloaded Netflix. And it's so weird because there is so much artistic and creative talent involved in that, from people designing the logos for TV shows that are coming out, or the films or whatever, to lighting, audio, screenwriting, actors. But then if I was to go outside and speak to someone and say, like, have you relied on art during lockdown? Chances are they'd be like, no. And I think that's quite sad. One of the best things as an artist you can do is to go outside and share your work and get that sort of exposure. And without that face-to-face communication, it does become very sort of arduous. And
it does. And at a political kind of level, we had, the arts had to fight so much for that. I think, what was it, like £1 billion, something like that. That
I think
investment,
so, yeah.
that the government kind of reluctantly gave into. But every single person consumes some form of art on a daily basis, whether that's an advert on the side of a bus, that somebody's done, not even on the TV. You read, they read the newspaper, that's still art, TV, music, radio, all these things are all art. So I think that the level of public acknowledgement for how important art is, and the arts are, and also the facilitating artists, and is ridiculously low compared to how much art is consumed by everybody.
It's absolutely abhorrent. I mean, if you decided to take away all forms of art from society for one day, everything would just fall to shit. Like, it would just not work.
No, it would.
But then, like, now, if someone said to me, Luke, I need some sort of studio or whatever to go and produce a piece of work, I would not know where to send them. I think it's all right in Manchester. I think with Manchester having 3 universities and like the northern quarter, I think Manchester definitely does have a good appreciation for art.
Yes, it does. Yeah, in a kind of grassroots level of, like, yours and mine hometown and things, at a community kind of level, there's not a lot of grassroots kind of stuff, is there, where people would be encouraged to go, right, okay, I'm going to be an actor, doesn't matter if you laugh, it doesn't matter if whatever, I'm going to do that, and then move onwards to the big city, or even stay locally. There's not a lot of that, is there? Manchester's obviously an incredibly progressive, like the same as Liverpool, incredibly progressive places, and they appreciate art, on a whole level, as a whole, but not necessarily in other kind of more polarized kind of working class kind of areas.
People here are so honest and hard-working that you would think that they would have more appreciation for art, because if you think of how much the working class has impacted art, post-industrial revolution, art has just become so diverse, and there is some form of there is an artistic movement that at least everybody can enjoy.
Yeah, totally. Stoke is the was the pottery, powerhouse of the entire world at one point. And even if it was ceramics, or it was pottery, or designing something like that, I mean, to be fair, and what I was going to say before, I think being in the arts, even at a grassroots level, can be seen as a privileged kind of choice, that you don't need to desperately go out and work a job, and you can concentrate on these more kind of abstract kind of like career pattern things. And I do think it's an issue with kind of government investment, and the people who do have the money and do have the power, because what they should be doing is keeping community centres open, keeping these industries open, where their creative outlet is the kind of subtext of that thing, if you know what I mean. And working class people as a whole, I maybe they do have a kind of resistance to it, but I think that's more in terms of the arts is a privileged thing, but it shouldn't be. art shouldn't be considered a middle class, only accessible by a kind of middle class kind of outlet. It should be actually people who are working class do have an artistic potential, but it's just they get shunned for wanting to kind of pursue it, if you know what I mean. On the whole, I'm trying not to talk with a kind of this is definitely what it is and this is definitely what it's not. If you know what I mean, I don't want to
absolutely agree with you. I think
that
that's definitely something else that another negative that has come with COVID is, I mean, it would not surprise me if once things sort of return back to normal, the arts will be one of those things that is sort of like, oh, we'll get to you eventually, don't worry. Just wait there. While people are walking around listening to music, go home and watching films, and it's crazy because art is so supportive of everything. And then the government craps all over it. It's like it'd be like kicking your mum in the shin. It's like everything that they've done for you, and you kick them in the shin and go, but
she's made your brew, she's made your tea, she's done your washing and everything, and then at the end of all that, as you go to bed, you just lamp her in the back of the leg.
It's so we've got such a strange attitude to art.
Yeah,
we really have. But I would definitely say that the creative community is one of the strongest ones.
Yes.
The amount of people, when I posted on Facebook, and there's another website called The Dots, which is becoming more popular, which is sort of like LinkedIn for creatives. It's really good. It's not got all of that phony like suit and tie crap that LinkedIn has. It's very, very authentic. Posting on there, a lot of people will then get back in touch and they'll say, like, I mean, I've had people offer to design like the logos for the podcast. I've had people offer producing jingles or whatever like that. It's such a helpful community, and a lot of it is, I've always said don't work for free, but that doesn't mean only work for money. A lot of the time in the artistic community, you will do a favor for somebody and then they'll return that favor again.
Exactly right.
I had a friend at university, and he did like a couple things for me, and he was a musician, and he was struggling with his songwriting, and he'd read my poems and stuff like that, and we had very similar music taste, and he said, he was like, would you be able to help me out with writing a few songs? I'm struggling. And I was like, absolutely, yeah. I mean, the amount that you've helped me, of course I'll help you back. Yeah, and that is
yeah, there's different currencies, isn't there, in creative arts? There's not only, money, there's exposure, there's favors, there's connections, which is why this podcast is so important, because that is a huge currency in creative industry.
Yeah, definitely. My final project at university, I worked with a sound engineer that I met through somebody else, and I ended up getting like the highest grade I've ever gotten on anything ever, and that was built through connections, and like we're both saying, that's exactly what this is all about, because there could be somebody else sitting in Stoke or Durham thinking, I want to sort of release all of this creativity, but I've got no idea how. I don't know who to get in touch with. I don't know whether I should go on to do an apprenticeship or go to college and then go to university or what. I don't know what to do. And I mean, the best advice I would give to people is to just, fire out emails, try and meet people, obviously, when it's safe. And the creative community is so good for that, because we're all lonely little weirdos.
Lonely little weirdos, mate, that unite.
Yeah, exactly.
Honestly, no, we are, like, that's exactly right. We're all in the same, in the same boat, and helping each other. It's to me, like, although going to university has been the best experience of my life for, countless reasons, I wish that people didn't feel like they had to do that in order to realize their kind of creative potential, like move to the big pool. I wish that there was more of a kind of, I actually want to be this person and be this creative, but I want to stick around home. And I want to, maybe be a lot more community orientated in my creative work and things. And I wish there was that option for, more so for people, which unfortunately there isn't.
I know people that got like first class with honours at university, but they wish that they'd gone and done apprenticeships somewhere else. There are people that are sort of naturally talented in terms of art, so they're like sculptors and fine artists, and they've realised that they don't need to go to university and that they can sort of do it themselves.
That's right.
Which is absolutely fantastic. Like if it's unbelievable.
And it's fantastic. Yeah.
I think that's definitely one of the upsides of social media. I mean, there are so many pros and cons to social media in terms of like exposing your art and stuff, but you don't necessarily have to go and get a degree to meet all these people. I mean, for example, me and you, we met over social media. Like there are so many people that are using. I mean, there is. I'm not going to speak too much about her because she's going to feature on one of the episodes. But there is a girl that used TikTok to her advantage to show her art, and
yes, show her art, and she got an incredible. I remember, she got an incredible kind of audience, didn't
people, she? And even then, like sharing your work on social media, not everybody is gonna buy it, but they'll be like, oh right, I know somebody that will. Yeah, or it's so and so's birthday in 6 months. I'm going to save up and I'm going to get that. I'm going to show this to this person.
Exactly, it's a kind of chain. It's a chain reaction, isn't it? It's like a domino effect. Even if it's not the first person who sees it, it could be the 10th because they've passed it on. And social media is, as kind of negative as it can be, in terms of exposure for your creative work, I think it's exponentially good. It's a good thing because, especially if you don't have access to workshops, you don't have access to higher education. If you were going to pursue a creative art, to send it out to people and go, what do you think of this thing, even if it was a paragraph of an extract or a painting that you've half finished or a song that you haven't mixed and mastered. Like it's so important for you to have that level of audience, even if it's people like you said going, I don't necessarily like this, I'm not going to buy it, this is not my thing, but it's da-da-da or it's da-da-da, and it gets you used to that element of letting go of your thing as well, and just being being brave and putting it out there
as well. I've just thought that it helps with expenses as well, because I mean, creating a portfolio, especially if you're a photographer or like a painter or a drawer, an illustrator or something like that, putting together a portfolio is not cheap at all. If people then want to see your work, you can just use social media instead and say like, here's the link to my Instagram. I've got all my work on a Pinterest board. I've got it all here. I've got a WordPress blog, whatever. It can make it a lot more financially viable for people, because that's definitely a worry people have about going to university and going on to like further education, because it isn't cheap, but there are definitely ways that there are things you can do that help you out massively. Like if you effectively use social media, it can be used so well.
Well, yeah. Your reach is, potentially almost infinite, isn't it? Like your reach can be incredible. Like if you were to learn the kind of tricks and the marketing, and you can do like targeted adverts, can't you, for like as little as £2, and that can get you to more people than your friends list or whatever. It is an incredible resource if you even if you don't necessarily know how to use it correctly and you just go and put it on a post and look at this, you've still got a great reach, but you can also build your kind of knowledge on how to use that to its most effective kind of level, which could be better than potentially anything. Could be better than university. I know I've probably had 4 or 5 times more of an audience on social media than I've had at uni. Like like massively so.
And especially now, I mean, I know that I didn't want to talk about COVID too much with the podcast and stuff, but it's just such a huge factor in people exposing the work. And I think there was a lot of worry at first where people were thinking, like, I don't know how I'm going to be able to get my work out there. And then there are people using the dots TikTok. I mean, if somebody said to me, how would you use TikTok to promote your work? I'd be like, I don't know.
Do
Nah.
not have a clue.
She's done it so well. Like, I was just absolutely stunned. And she was saying how grateful she is for the amount of people that have liked it and shared it. And I think it's definitely sort of it's almost helped us learn a bit more about ourselves, and as
Yeah.
cringy as it is and stuff, being locked up, you do have to find ways to sort of get out there, and even if it
That's
isn't
exactly
the digital
right,
world.
and make those connections, and you have to, because physically
Yeah,
you're locked in, like you said, but you can then, like, the word isn't mentally, but you can somehow kind of transcend your physical body in
yeah,
social media and go woo, into the
yeah,
world like
yeah,
like an essence, you know what I mean? And you can meet all these people and make these connections. I mean, like you're saying, is it Kristen or Christine?
Kristen,
Did
yeah,
you say? Yeah, she's had an unbelievable reach on that on
yeah.
TikTok. And thinking, like, how long would it have taken her to meet all those people and go, can you do, physically, how long would it have taken?
I think the amount of people that she's reached, I don't think anybody would meet that many
No,
people in
that's
their
what. Yeah,
lifetime.
exactly. Who would then also definitely be interested in that? Yeah.
Yeah, it's so weird because I mean, even now I still post stuff on like Twitter or whatever, and I am not that good with. I'm quite good with Facebook. I'm part of lots of groups and the dots and stuff like that. I still sort of need to crack Twitter. I'm like a socialist propaganda on Twitter. It's just everything is just against the Tories.
Fantastic. I need to
So
subscribe.
I need to learn how to
Yeah.
use Twitter in terms of putting my work out there. But there are people that will post one picture of something that they've created and then bang, it's
Yeah.
blown the fuck up so massively. Me posting on Twitter is same as me going to my window and shouting at my neighbour. Like, it's not going to do anything because I don't know how to do it effectively. But then there are people that do, and especially like people around our age, and like I know it's usually like younger people that are on TikTok and stuff like that. They're just so sort of like we're so efficient at building these sorts of connections through social media. Like I said, we were sort of worried at first with COVID, but we've kind of just shit all over it and gone, I'm still going to do what I usually do.
It the middle finger. Like, that's exactly right. I think people are quick to criticise social media, rightfully so, because I don't think it's a substitution for everyday human interaction. And I would agree with that. But from a creative point of view, we have been given these massive resources and actually blown all level of expectation out of the way. You know what I mean? Out the water. Like we've completely done it, and hopefully it's something that, whilst physical interaction is going to be restricted and limited, something that we can continue to build on, and more people kind of feel more confident to start to use them for those reasons.
No, it is. It's absolutely fantastic. Just to we'll go back a bit and talk a little bit more about your work. Tell us about Skiddle. Like, tell us about how you got to know them and
So Skiddle was interesting because that was a like friend of a friend kind of thing. So somebody asked me if I wanted to cover a gig, and this was a girl that I knew from school. She asked me, I didn't know at Skiddle at this point, but she was like, "Oh, hi, I know you like this band. they're playing Friday night. I can't go when I've got like a press pass. Would you want to go and maybe just write a little review about it? So I was like, oh, I'm not in Stoke at that time, unfortunately, but I would be totally interested in doing this if this was a thing that was ongoing. So her boyfriend was then at Skiddle, and he became my line manager. And basically, they would give you set briefs. They would give you things that they'd already decided upon first. So like, we're going to do an interview with we're going to do an article about this. Do you want to do it? So then I would send them what I thought met the brief really well, and they were like, yeah, that's cool, like, you've done that interview, you've done that article. I should say I'd do the articles first, and then after a little bit they were like, okay, you're going to do an interview now. These are the things that we're going to talk about, like press release, it's a new album, either over email or over the phone. So then eventually started doing that, started getting gigs and festivals for free, which was like absolutely amazing, like press pass and stuff. I was like, sound, save that money, spend it on beer, you know what I mean? Like that was incredible. And that was like a slightly different experience for me, because there is a massive amount of difference in the kind of content and structure of journalistic writing than there is in kind of long form prose writing. And to write about music, which is something that I've always been incredibly passionate about and involved in, it was amazing too. So I started writing for those, and then that became a kind of, over time, a long haul thing, and they kind of changed up their model a bit, and they were like, okay, we want you to submit your own ideas for articles now, and we'll approve them. So that was kind of really interesting for me, because it was still at a level where I was comfortable, but that is a kind of taster of what actual, if you were to write for a newspaper or something, you would be pitching them an article that you were going to write. So that was like, really interesting for me, but I was still super comfortable. It was still to do with music, like writing about whether we should cancel Morrissey and all these things that were like really super interesting to me. So Skiddle gave me a great platform to kind of explore those things from an industry point of view, which was very useful and very helpful. And then I also started writing for Culture Calling and Far Out magazine. So Culture Calling was before Far Out, and that was mainly like top 10, your kind of BuzzFeed, you know what I mean, clickbait kind of. Here's the top 10, places to visit on Vampire Night or whatever, like that, like nothing too kind of challenging to produce really. And then Far Out magazine was music and film, so kind of similar thing to Skiddle, but more film orientated and TV. And that was all of these things were remote. I luckily know Henry, my line manager at Skiddle now, very well, so I've met him in person and things, but most of the time it was they fire an email exchanges kind of things, and so I've been doing that now. Skiddle has stopped recently because they've had to furlough their staff. Obviously the live performances have gone, haven't they? So they're not making it. They're a ticket company as well. Like that's their thing, isn't it? They sell tickets for events. So their business has kind of come to a grinding halt. So they've recently furloughed. So that's stopped, but only temporarily. So I've been doing that for about 3 years now. And then the other two, Far Out, I stopped writing for because of my masters. And that was kind of intensifying, and I wanted to concentrate on that. And then Culture Calling stopped when I finished my undergrad. But I did that for about a year, and I did Far Out for about 9-10 months, something like that. But Skiddle's the ongoing one, and I've done that for about 3 years. Yeah, it's cool. Like I obviously do my own writing and do books and whatever, but then to go, oh, actually, I just fancy writing a little piece about this album that I've listened to anyway, like regardless of them asking me to, and they're just giving me a platform to kind of do those things and to see bands and to interview really interesting, creative, musicians. So yeah, that was like they have provided an absolutely brilliant platform for me, for my writing, and also for connections within that industry that I wouldn't necessarily have.
I think that's definitely one of the best things about writing is you can write about anything. absolutely, and like it. I don't know if you absolutely love Afflecks in Northern Quarter, they'd probably let you write something about them. If you absolutely love, I don't know, God, literally anything, it doesn't matter. You can write absolutely anything, and being able to sort of surround yourself with what you are already interested and invested in it's not very common, and one of the best ways to do that is to sort of
That's right.
write about it. And even if you're in a good mood, you can write a piece that's praising like a new album or a new film, or even like food, something that you really love. Or if you're in like a horrible foul mood, you can put like a Bastille album on and write the most scathing review of your life.
Burn it down, yeah.
Yeah, like, you can absolutely rinse it.
Yeah.
It's just so like versatile and fluid. It's not one of those things where like, oh, it's raining so I can't go out today, and I don't know, my camera's not waterproof, can't do that today.
Yeah.
It's like, it does not matter, because if it's absolutely Baltic outside and it's freezing, you can stay in wrapped up in bed or whatever. If it's absolutely scorching outside, I mean, you can. I've even done bits where I've gone and sat with friends, and like we've just had like, especially at uni, like sit down in the park and just have like a few beers while you're working away. Like,
that's right, yeah.
It's so good, and it's one of those jobs where the more connections and the more people that you know, the better it is for you.
Yeah, totally. It kind of, providing you invest yourself in that side of things, it can only get better. You know what I mean? Your experiences can only get better. And in terms of your writing as well, you develop a lot more of a personality because of your influences around you, things like that. Your voice, your individual voice becomes a lot stronger.
Definitely. Right, Dan, I think that is it.
Oh, they're done. Wow, time genuinely flies, mate.
I just wanted to say a massive thanks to Dan Lovatt for being on the episode today. He's definitely somebody that you should pay a lot of attention to. He knows what he's doing. Published, featuring in Fringe. Yeah, so just massive thanks, Dan. Massive thanks.
No problem, and thank you so much for having me. For people who might want to keep up with what I'm doing, my Facebook, you can find me as Dan Lovatt. My Instagram is the Dan Lovatt Writer, all one word. And I'm also about to set up a WordPress page. I haven't quite done that yet. I'm currently working on 2 novels, which will hopefully be released next year. So follow those social media tags. You can keep up with me there. And thanks for having me.
No, thanks very much for being here, Dan.
Thank you.
Cheers.